Innovators. Axel Dumas, sixth generation scion of the Hermes luxury goods dynasty, and since February its CEO, has a secret. Sitting in his 10th floor office with a glittering view of Montmartre for an appointment that's taken weeks of negotiations, Dumas is 4 days away from replacing Christophe Lemaire, the highly regarded designer of Hermes' important ready-to-wear women's fashion line. So what does the 44-year-old chief executive want to talk about? The main strength of Hermes is the love of craftsmanship. It's the first thing he says in his accented but fluent English. 10 seconds later, we see ourselves as creative craftsmen. 30 minutes in, the philosophy of Hermes is to keep craftsmanship alive. After 2 hours, Dumas is still holding back on the granular details, no matter which way I ask, of how Hermes has emerged as the most ascendant company in the $300 billion luxury market. No guidance on the art of selling everything from 94,000 crocodile leather t-shirts to $1,275 beach towels. And certainly, nary a hint that Dumas would imminently replace Lemaire with Nadezh Vanhy-Saivolsky, the 36-year-old design director at The Row, the couture clothing brand run by the Olsen twins, even though he knew that I would soon find out along with the rest of the world. But all this obfuscation and secrecy perversely also drives home what has prompted Hermes stock to shoot up 175% over the past 5 years. Indeed, on Forbes' accompanying list of the world's most innovative public companies, this 177-year-old Hermes is ranked number 13, ahead of companies such as Netflix, Priceline, and Starbucks. The list, determined by measuring which companies trade at a level incongruous to their underlying financials and assets, measures each company's market-tested premium for innovation. Dumas' high-flying stock, accelerated by LVMH apparent interest in a takeover several years ago, and a thin float doesn't rely on the technological efficiencies that drive so many others on this ranking, nor is it propelled solely by its endlessly repeated craftsmanship, though that's certainly an essential underpinning. At Hermes, any lasting premium derives from mystique. After all, selling a commodity ultimately boils down to one thing: price. But selling beautiful objects that people don't inherently need? That requires a more complicated formula that Hermes has mastered. Last year, the company set a record, reporting an operating profit of 1.69 billion with 5 billion in sales, the fastest growing company in this industry over the past 6 years. Fueled by a sort of branding and marketing craftsmanship as exacting as the stitching on one of its iconic Birkin bags. The payoff for this softer kind of innovation is enough. The payoff for this softer kind of innovation is enough to make a social media startup founder blush. In examining Hermes's ownership structure, Forbes estimates that at least 5 family members now belong on our global billionaires list, and the collective fortune for Dumas' family now tops $25 billion, more than the Rockefellers, the Mellons, and the Fords combined. The creation of one of the world's great wealth machines built within the kind of sprawling family structure that tends to stifle innovation rather than spawn it boils down to three dates. The first one traces back to 1837, when a leather harness maker named Thierry Hermes established a shop in Paris to the beau monde, who relied on equipage for travel. The quality and beauty of Hermes bridles and harnesses were unrivaled. Thierry had only one child, Charles Emile, who moved the business to 24 Rue de Faubourg Saint-Honoré, where it remains to this day. Charles Emile, in turn, had two sons, Adolphe and Emile Maurice, who transformed the business into Hermes frère. But eventually, Adolphe believed the company had a limited future in the era of the horseless carriage, leaving Emile to carry on. Emile had four daughters, one of whom died in 1920, which explains why no one involved in the family business is named Hermes. It's those descendants, the fifth and sixth generations, who control the company today. The second turning point for Hermes came far more recently in 1989. Over the course of the 20th century, Hermes remained one of the world's great luxury brands. But with its focus on artisans, every one of its leather goods is made by hand in 12 workshops in France by more than 3,000 skilled workers. It was built to trot, not gallop. Under Axel Dumas' uncle Jean-Louis Dumas, CEO from 1978 to 2006, much of the family ownership had split into a Russian nesting doll-like group of six holding companies. Layered atop, that was an ingenious two-tier management structure engineered by Jean-Louis. One was more about ownership, a family-only entity named Émile Hermès SARL, after their ancestor, that sets budgets, approves loans, and exercises veto power. The other, Hermes International, oversees the day-to-day management of the company and incorporates outsiders. Non-family members currently occupy 4 of 11 board spots. As with everything Hermes, it was Byzantine and painstakingly mapped out. It worked. The new structure helped Hermes in 1993 sell 4% of its shares to the public, giving younger generations a way to liquidate while allowing the family to keep control. And that new war chest helped encourage Hermes to think bigger than a fine leather goods maker. Jean-Louis Dumas expanded the company into men's ready-to-wear attire, tableware, and furniture. Between 1989 and 2006, sales grew fourfold to 1.9 billion. Still, it wasn't a foolproof plan. Bernard Arnault, head of the world's largest luxury company, LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, took note of the growth. Hermes fit right into his bourgeoisie portfolio in the same way Dior and Fendi did. So in 2002, Arnault began accumulating shares, using the same cash-settled equity swap strategy that hedge funds use to amass positions without technically needing to disclose. In 2010, Arnault publicly revealed that he controlled 17% of Hermes, and a takeover seemed a fait accompli. With the stock up 30% on such speculation, the three branches of the remaining Hermes family were expected to take the money and run. Arnault's move instead created the company's final turning point. Rather than cash out, the family circled its leather upholstered wagons. Patrick Thomas, the non-family member who served as CEO between Jean-Louis Dumas and Axel Dumas, famously declared, "If you want to seduce a beautiful woman, you don't start raping her from behind." In another bold move in 2011, more than 50 descendants of Thierry Hermes pooled their shares into what was essentially a $16 billion co-op called H51, the contributors representing 50.2% of all company shares, contractually agreed not to sell any shares for the next 2 decades. Two other major shareholders, fifth-generation family members, Bertrand Puech, now 78, and Nicolas Puech, 71, kept their shares outside H51, but also held the line against LVMH, agreeing to give other family members the right of first refusal if they ever decided to sell. Staring at a chart of the family's Baroque ownership structure, see page 94, can cause dizziness. LVMH and Hermes continue to fight it out in court, with Hermes even pursuing criminal charges for insider trading. LVMH has countersued, claiming false accusation. The battle of my generation, says Axel Dumas. Hermes is not for sale. We're going to fight to stay independent. However, it turns out the family's unified front has proved profitable for Hermes. For the company, the two-decade time frame once again allows it to make long-term decisions as if it were a private company. And for the family, it was a burn the ships decision. The lockup means that most family members must make do with dividends, although for people like Nicolas Puig, whose 2.1 billion holding generates an annual dividend of around 20 million, it's enough to keep him in the horses at his Spanish state. Thierry Hermes would surely have approved. Mystique is hard enough. Mystique is hard enough to achieve, let alone maintain over 2 centuries. But here's one example of how Hermes carefully cultivated its image. In May of this year, the world's most elegant carnival was staged inside an office space on Wall Street. Financier JP Morgan's legendary corner bunker at 23 Wall Street. A photo booth was set up to capture celebrity guests atop carousel horses. A full synchronized swimming dance number was performed, and a fortune teller predicted the future based on a selection of silk scarves. This is how Hermes celebrated its first women's runway show in the United States. Much as one might want to congratulate the marketing department for the sensory overload spectacle down to taste, champagne was served from a bango bar shaped like an enamel Hermes bracelet, and smelled white-gowned ingenue preferred flowers scented with the brand's latest fragrance, cooing, "Would you like to smell Jour de Hermès Absolu?" That would be impossible. Hermes doesn't have a marketing department. Why should it? McKinsey doesn't have a consulting department, nor does Microsoft have a software department. Marketing is Hermes's core business. At the carnival, standing atop the red carpet and greeting the 800 VIPs, including Anna Wintour, Jodie Foster, and Martha Stewart, as they entered was Hermes' de facto head of marketing, Axel Dumas. Our business is about creating desire. He says it can't be fickle because desire is fickle, but we try to have creativity to suspend the momentum. To instill this ethos in the company, all new employees are steeped in Hermes' desire creating culture through 3-day sessions called Inside the Orange Box, so named for the signature packaging that trace the company back to Thierry Hermes and give a history of each of the product categories, or métier, in Hermes speak, which is French for a trade. Thus, every Hermes employee can wax philosophical about the Kelly bag, which is the trapezoidal saddle bag from the 1890s that Axel Dumas' grandfather transformed into women's handbag, and that Grace Kelly made iconic. But the main guardian of the Hermes mystique is the family itself. According to a former top Hermes executive, a luxury consultant with close ties to Hermes, as well as one of the company's Asian executives, both of whom insisted on anonymity, non-family executives rarely make strategy or branding decisions. Objects of desire. Objects of desire. The artisans of Hermes create everything from basketballs and custom car interiors to Birkin bags and bicycles. Without the input of at least one Hermes descendant, no strategy decisions are made, many of whom may wear several hats at the company and thus hold sway over multiple métiers. If there are 3 or 5 people around the table and the family member says yes, who will say no? Says the consultant. Nobody's powerful enough to counter that. Once product and marketing sensibilities are vetted, however, a top-heavy roster of lieutenants is giving a large degree of autonomy to execute. Creative director Pierre-Alex is Axel Dumas' first cousin, sets the tone, but the company perfumer or nose, Jean-Claude Elena, runs a laboratory inside his home outside the city of Grasse and develops Hermes fragrances. Another cousin, Pascal Musa, heads Petit H, a division that makes one-of-a-kind objets from Hermes remnant scraps of crocodile skin or swaths of unused silk. And the events teams, once given their marching orders, let their whimsy show as evidence at JP Morgan's old office. We've always said we don't take ourselves too seriously at Hermes, says the company US CEO Robert Chavez. The autonomy is even greater at the retail level. Twice a year, more than 1,000 store representatives come to Paris for an event called Podium, where they select which pieces of merchandise they will carry. The family has decreed that each flagship store must pick at least one item from each of the 11 métiers, thus pushing them beyond handbags, scarves, and ties to perfume, jewelry, watches, home accessories. In giving these managers an elaborate menu to choose from, each store boasts merchandise unique to itself. The moneyed globetrotters who constitute their Hermes customer base constantly find themselves on a worldwide treasure hunt. For example, only in Beverly Hills can they find a 12,900 basketball and the 112,000 orange leather bookcase that was sold exclusively at the Costa Mesa store. So when they fall in love with that $1,300 bicycle, there's a pressure to get it. Since the company's website, while ahead of it, many luxury competitors, offers just a smattering of the Hermes product line. The top case study at the inside of the orange book, indoctrination, according to those who have attended, surrounds the Hermes Birkin bag, and rightly so. The Birkin, a chic cousin to the Kelly bag that runs from $8,300 to $150,000, embodies everything that keeps the Hermes brand so profitable. It also represents the highest order of Dumas' fabled craftsmanship. When I visit the six-story workshop in the Parisian suburb of Pantin, I watch French leather workers who must have at least 3 years of training before ascending to the Birkin duty. Hand-stitch each crocodile and goat leather seam with 2 needles and beeswax covered thread and hammer the tiny rivets that attach the clasps to the leather. Vertically integrated leather, no less. In another example that defines a different kind of innovation, Hermes purchased 2 crocodile farms in Australia in 2010 and an alligator farm in Louisiana to supply the finest skins. But since taste, as noted, is fickle, the ability to keep the Birkin as apparel's ultimate status symbol proves to be a cold, hard business. The genesis story helps, as with the Kelly bag, it began with a fashion symbol. In 1981, Jane Birkin, a British actress and it girl from London's swinging 60s, was sitting next to Jean-Louis Dumas on a flight between Paris and London when he noticed her overstuffed straw bag. "You should have one with pockets," he told her. "The day Hermes makes one with pockets, I will have that." "But I am Hermes," he told her, and soon ordered up a variation on the Kelly with a similar belt and lock closure. The Birkin debuted 3 years later and became an instant hit. While Hermes officially denies that bold-faced names get special treatment in procuring one, we consider all of our clients to be celebrities in their own right, says Chavez. The Birkin bag somehow over the decades finds its way onto the arms of the most current set of tastemakers. Beyonce, Lady Gaga, and Kim Kardashian all sport one, and Victoria Beckham is said to have a collection of Birkins worth more than $2 million. At LVMH, the paid celebrity endorsement is an odd, from Michelle Williams representing Louis Vuitton bags to Charlize Theron as the face of Dior perfume at Hermes. The perception and reality that the A-list is truly its customer proves to be a less expensive, more authentic endorsement. The velvet rope beckons the rest of us. You won't find a Birkin or a Kelly bag online or even in a store. And with Hermes says it has done away with its reputed waiting list, They would probably be 7 to 10 years, says Chavez. If you want a bag in lizard or crocodile, it would take longer. Like the most exclusive clubs, membership qualifications are intentionally vague. There's no specific rule about it, says Dumas. Echoes Chavez. There's really no system. Indeed, when I went to the New York City flagship on Madison Avenue to ask about buying a Birkin, I was told there were none in the store. When will you get one in? I asked innocently. I couldn't say. Could you take my information and let me know when one comes in? You don't do that here. I've heard there's a waiting list. You don't do that here.
When was the last time you had a Birkin for sale in a store? I couldn't say. I've heard that if I'm a good customer and spend a lot of money, I have a better chance of getting a Birkin. A Birkin. We don't do that here. Short of mega influence, the only short of mega influence, the only sure way to get one of the coveted bags is to buy it on the auction market, used. The appreciation of Hermes bags can be staggering, particularly for the more exotic skins. In 2013, Heritage Auction sold a collection of Birkin for 3 to 5 times the pre-sale estimates. The record for a Birkin was the $203,000, $203,150 that a collector paid in 2011 for a record crocodile bag with white gold and diamond detailing. That's mystique at its poshest level. Axel Dumas even orders lunch in a Hermes kind of way. I'll have your best steak, he says, paying little mind to the menu, while dining at New York's Capitol Grill. He's talking about what's next for the company. Hermes, which currently has 318 stores on 5 continents, is opening a new flagship in Shanghai this month. It already has 3 other maisons in that city. And while Dumas is renovating stores in Indonesia, Taiwan, and London, next year will carry an American focus with 7 expansions and openings, including a Manhattan perfume store near the World Trade Center and a new location in Miami. Though Dumas is typically circumspect about many other initiatives, he's willing to guarantee one thing, that Hermes, for all its legal battles, will not wind up succumbing to LVMH. The mood of the family has always been very strong and very determined, he says. We are here for the long term. Could he imagine his son or daughter following in his footsteps at the company? He says that he won't try to persuade them, but he also makes it clear that some members of the 7th generation would be expected to step up and continue the tradition of product excellence and sales sorcery.
I'm just a tenant for the next generation. Additional reporting by Hannah Elliott and